Let's talk about motivation. Why be a leader? Why be a leader? What's the world's motivation for leadership? Well, here's a quote from a book by two authors, Fiedler and Chemers. Leadership gives power over others. And with this power comes the satisfaction that one can not only have control over the fate of others, but also have greater control over one's own life and destiny. And the key word there is control. And I think some of you, especially those of you in the corporate world, I have a hunch that your company has sent you to some leadership seminars. And if you've been sent to leadership seminars at one time or another for business, you may have heard things like this. That one of the great advantages of being a leader is you can control the situation. You can control other people. You can control your own destiny, your own fate. And I think that's a very unbiblical motivation to be a leader. In fact, one of the shortest books in the Bible, 3 John, in that little tiny book of 3 John, we meet a man who is known for generation after generation now, not in a positive light, but in a bad light, a man named Diotrephes. The Apostle John said, Diotrephes, who loves to be first. And I find it so sad when people want to be in leadership because they want to be the big kahuna. They want to be number one. They want to be first. When the Bible, Diotrephes, is not painted in a good light, he's painted in a bad light because he wanted to be first. That's not a biblical motivation. What might be a biblical motivation to lead? You say, God, use me as a leader. Why would you want God to use you as a leader? Well, in your syllabus, I have quoted for you there Matthew chapter 20, a selection from verses 20 through 28. It goes like this. Jesus talking to his men. Remember the situation. Jesus and his 12 apostles are walking down the road, and the mother of James and John came up to him and said, Rabbi, when you come into your kingdom, I would love for you to put one of my sons on your right-hand side and the other son on the left-hand side, and I don't want to get too stereotypical here of the controlling mother, but, you can almost picture this little lady coming up to Jesus and say, hey, Jesus, do me a favor. Put my sons in positions of prominence. Put one of my sons on your right hand, one of my other son on your left hand, and Jesus says, you don't know what you're asking for. First of all, that's not my place to put people in those positions. That's God the Father's place. He said, but secondly, you don't know what you're asking for. And it doesn't say this explicitly in the Bible, but I almost picture Jesus pulling off the road. No, they weren't in a car or a bus or a van, but I can almost see him getting his men off to the side of the road and finding a shade tree and sitting down under the shade tree with his men. And those 13 guys are sitting there. I don't know if Mrs. Zebedee was still listening or not. But I can almost picture Jesus gathering these guys around and saying, you know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. And then he says emphatically, not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be your slave. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. Jesus said, my model for leadership is the world's model turned upside down. The world thinks of leadership in a pyramid fashion. The leader's at the top, and there's all these people under you that you can control and that serve you. And the great advantage, according to the world, the great advantage of being a leader is you can get lots of people to serve you. And Jesus took that model and literally turned it on its head. And he said, not so with you. He says, look at how I came to lead. I came to give. I came to give my life as a ransom for many. He says, don't be like the world. Don't be like the world that loves to lord it over other people. You be the kind of leaders who serve others. There's a fascinating account in the Old Testament of a leader who didn't get it. His name is Rehoboam. If you turn in 1 Kings, the book of 1 Kings, I'd like to read this account to you because it pictures so well a leader who had the opportunity to become a servant leader, but instead decided to be the kind of leader who was served by other people. And it ended up being his path to destruction. 1 Kings chapter 12. I'm going to start reading at verse 3. So they sent for Jeroboam, and he and the whole assembly of Israel went to Rehoboam. Rehoboam was the young king, the son of Solomon. Went to Rehoboam and said to him, "Your father put a heavy yoke on us, but now lighten the harsh labor and the heavy yoke he put on us, and we will serve you." Rehoboam answered, "Go away for 3 days and then come back to me." So the people went away. Then King Rehoboam consulted the elders who had served his father Solomon during his lifetime. "How would you advise me to answer these people?" he asked. By the way, just a little side note, that was a good thing to do. He went and asked some older men. Ask older men. Ask wise people, people that have been around the block a few times, their advice. And Rehoboam did that. They replied, "If today you will be a servant to these people and serve them and give them a favorable answer, they will always be your servants." But Rehoboam rejected the advice of the elders gave him and consulted the young men who had grown up with him and were serving him. He was being short-sighted. He said, "I'd rather listen to my peers than listen to older people." He asked them, "What is your advice? How would you answer these people who say to me, 'Lighten the yoke your father put on us'?" The young men who had grown up with him replied, "Tell these people who have said to you, 'Your father put a heavy yoke on us, but make our yoke lighter,' tell them, 'My little finger is thicker than my father's waist. My father laid on you a heavy yoke, I will make it even heavier. My father scourged you with whips, I will scourge you with scorpions." 3 days later, Jeroboam and all the people returned to Rehoboam, as the king had said, "Come back to me in 3 days." The king advised the people harshly, answered the people harshly. Rejecting the advice given him by the elders, he followed the advice of the young men and said, "My father made your yoke heavy, I will make it even heavier. My father scourged you with whips, I will scourge you with scorpions." So the king did not listen to the people, for this turn of events was from the Lord, to fulfill the word of the Lord had spoken to Jeroboam, son of Nebat, through Ahijah the Shilonite. When all Israel saw the king refuse to listen to them, they answered the king, "What share do we have in David? What part in Jesse's son? To your tents, O Israel. Look after your own house, O David." So the Israelites went home. But as for the Israelites who were living in the towns of Judah, Rehoboam still ruled over them. King Rehoboam sent out Adoniram, who was in charge of forced labor, but all Israel stoned him to death. King Rehoboam, however, managed to get into his chariot and escape to Jerusalem. So Israel has been in rebellion against the house of David to this day. You know, that little chapter in the book of Israel's history is a good example to all of us who aspire to be leaders. If our intent in leadership is to get other people to serve us, that we will be heavy-handed, demanding, harsh, so that we can control other people and get them to do what we say, it'll be to our destruction. Those elders were wise and telling young Rehoboam, "Serve your people. Serve your people, and they'll follow you. You be a servant to them, and they will gladly be a servant to you in your leadership." King Rehoboam didn't get it, did he? J. Oswald Sanders wrote, "Jesus taught that any ambition that centers around and terminates in oneself is wrong. On the other hand, an ambition which has as its center the glory of God and the welfare of His church is not only legitimate, but positively praiseworthy." And John MacArthur, "The world wants leaders who achieve at others' expense, but Jesus wants leaders who stoop to wash their followers' dirty feet. He wants leaders characterized by love, humility, and a willingness to put other needs first." So why be a leader? How would you summarize? Why be a leader? In order to glorify God by serving Him and serving His people. The motivation to be a leader is not to get people to serve you. The motivation to be a leader is to bring glory to God by serving His people. So we need to ask the next question then.